compassion by its nature has a certain inner strength and a certain, what's the word? Peacefulness to it. It's not a disturbed state of mind. And disturbed states of mind are always distorted also from a Buddhist point of view. So in other words, like if we wanted something, right? In other words, and actually this is an important distinction too. Some things that we want are realistic and positive, right? Like if I'm thirsty and I want to drink, that's not a bad thing, right? Disturbed states of mind exaggerate, right? It's like saying, if I can have that ice cream, then I'll be happy, right? Then I'll really feel at peace. That's a disturbed state of mind because that's not the nature of ice cream, right? Ice cream is cold, but it doesn't make, it doesn't transform the mind into happiness. Or I want this partner, then I'll, when I have this partner, then I'll be happy. It's like that, right? It's exaggerating the quality, and there's an agitation to that that's not realistic. So what this is saying is, if you want to be happy, right, and if you want to cultivate love and compassion, the first thing you have to do is know in yourself, what are my worst disturbed states of mind, right? If you don't know that, then you can't work on your mind. So what it's saying is, you have to actually know yourself and analyze, okay, day in and day out, right, what are the disturbed states of mind that I tend to have the most? Am I somebody who tends to get angry a lot? Is that my biggest, greatest, right? When it says greatest, that's what it's saying. Is my problem that I get angry really fast? Is my problem that I tend to get jealous when I see some other people having things I don't want? I think, oh, that's not fair, I deserve that. Do I tend to be caught up in addictive craving? Is that my problem? That I'm craving after something or other, right? And there are lists of, like, in Buddhism, there are different lists. There's one list has 3 root delusions, then there's 6 delusions, then disturbing emotions, the same thing, delusion, disturbing. There's a list of 3, of 6, of a list of 7, and there's a list of around 50, then there's a list of 300 something. Those lists aren't like for, what's the word? The purpose of those lists, when the Buddha made up lists, right, like that, was for was for a mirror, right? In other words, like, if you don't know, like, what is a disturbing emotion? Well, here's some lists. Right? So, those basic lists is 3: ignorance, desire or craving, not any kind of desire, but unrealistic desire, and anger. Right? That's the most simple list. Then you can expand out from there. There's like another list that adds in to those 3: pride, right? Like a pride of arrogance, wrong views, like understanding the world in completely wrong ways. So there are all different kinds of disturbing emotions. But my point here is this, and this one, number 7, actually if you analyze it deeply, you could say it embodies the entire path of Buddhism, is you have to analyze your mind and see, so what is my worst? What is my biggest delusion, right? And then you have to know how to counter it. Right? You have to actually work to counter it. And what it's saying is this, there's an analogy that's sometimes given for that, which is, if you wanted to grow vegetables in a plot of land that had poison ivy growing in it, right? Just throwing some vegetable seeds in that particular plot of land is not going to work, right? First of all, they won't grow, and secondly, even if they do, you're not going to want to go in there and pick them, and so on. So the first step is to clear out, right? To make some room for love, to make some room for compassion. And if your mind is completely obsessed with jealousy, for example, right? How in the world are you going to cultivate love? It's impossible, right? You can't have love while you're being jealous. And anger, right? If you're angry at others, you can't be loving towards them. It's impossible, right? While your mind is angry, you can't have love. Same thing with craving, right? While you're craving after something from others, you can't be loving to them because you want stuff from them, right? You're looking at them as like as somebody to get something from. Well, that's not loving them, right? There's no room for love in that state of mind. Actually, if you analyze deeply, and this is a bit disturbing, much of our relationships with others that we call love may be that, right? It may just be wanting stuff from people. And then we may label that love. But that's not, again, this is introspective, right? Love is actually a state of mind which is cherishing others, feeling from your heart, a warmth towards them and wanting them to be happy, and that moment, that's your priority, is wishing deeply from your heart that they be happy because you cherish and feel so warmly towards them. So again, it's not saying you never have love for those people, but you have to analyze for yourself in your own mind, when I'm in a state of, I want this from that person, that's not love, right? There's no way that you can have love and that at the same moment, that's all. Maybe some other moment, I don't know, but You see my point there? So this one, train to counter whichever disturbing emotion is greatest, is a real, there's no way to practice without that, right? Because you have to analyze for yourself what's my greatest disturbing emotion. Then you have to analyze, is it a disturbing emotion? Because actually if you try it for yourself right now, right? What your mind will do, I'm going to predict this, you can disagree with me, but I predict what your mind will do is if you do it long enough, at some point your mind's going to say, no, that's not a disturbing emotion, that's a good thing. No, that's not bad. So I don't want to get rid of that. Right. Maybe it's on the list, the Buddha's list of bad things. Maybe he was wrong on that one point. I think that's a good thing. So you have to analyze for yourself, is it good or is it bad? That's all. And again, it's not saying you have to accept that the Buddha was right. That's not the point here. The point is like, right, because somebody who's prideful doesn't think pride is a bad thing. Right? They may, if you analyze this and explain it to them, for a moment they may say it's a bad thing, but then 5 minutes later they say, no, but there are good things about it. Right? And the same thing with like wanting what I want, right? And like with that kind of craving. If you analyze it deeply while a Buddhist, while somebody's teaching Buddhism or while you're reading a book, you may feel, yeah, that's right. But a few minutes later you're going to feel, no, that's not right. I don't want to give that up. And so the point here is you have to contemplate deeply these points and see for yourself, is that true or is it not true? Then if you come to the conclusion it's true, then you have to work on countering it, right? And by countering it, you're clearing the ground to then cultivate love and compassion. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go through a few. Now, what I want to say about these other ones, these other points here, in general, is this: I think they're very useful. That one, I think, I wanted to start with that one because I think it's particularly useful. But I want to say, if I were going to summarize, because in preparing, I read over a whole bunch of commentaries and think about it. I want to say, like, what I believe anyway. This is just. I always preface that by saying this is like my own view. There was when the Tibetan Lamas teach on this, they'll just go through them. Does that make sense? They'll go through and say, this is what this one means, this is what that one means. Because I've heard commentaries on it, but now I'm like, what's the word? Laughing from my own perspective for a minute. So I like to introduce that to say that so you don't think I'm like, what's the word? So I differentiate my own view from the traditional Buddhist view. My own view is that these are in large part really important. And the reason why they're really important is that our egos tend to want to co-opt everything. Right? In other words, whatever we do, like we say, oh yeah, I'm going to be more loving, then we like want to co-opt it. Sit back to the ego. Aren't I great? I'm so loving. Right? You see what I'm saying? Like, the ego can co-opt anything. Now again, that's my own view, but actually it's not what Buddhism teaches. And so what these teachings, what I believe these commitments or precepts or ideas are suggesting, are doing is saying, it's like Buddhist masters over the centuries said, well, everybody's like that. In other words, everybody's ego wants to co-opt the training and make it another way to make myself even more, what's the word? Support even more the ground of the ego and protect the ego even more, like some cocoon around it, which actually doesn't create love or compassion. So I think what these are, my view is that what these are doing is that Buddhist masters over the centuries said, oh, here are the common mistakes people make with their ego. Be careful of these, because you'll probably do them too, because this is what people do. And even monks and even people whatever do this, so we probably will too. And so the first of those, and I'll just try to go through them a little bit. And different, anyway, I'll just go through. Don't go against the mind training you promised to observe. So, first of all, again, I want to emphasize the point I already made, which is that the word here is mind training, right? So it's training your mind. It's not it's not wearing a costume, it's not putting on a pretense, it's not trying to appear a certain way to people. It's training your mind. And why do they say don't go against the mind training you promised to observe? Because one of the ways that our ego co-opts things is that we make up our own version. Right? Or we do part and leave out the parts that are inconvenient. Right? I remember sometimes Lama Zopa when he teaches on this point, he says, when you meet a great teacher, right, like a great master, a great saint, let's say, a great teacher, great lama. That's actually what lama means, kind of a saintly teacher. And they give you advice for training your mind. Right? he said, then there comes a contest, where he said, on the one hand, you have the advice of this great, compassionate advisor. On the other hand, you have the advice of your ego. And he said, his observation as he travels around the world is most people follow the advice of their ego. He said, so the teacher gives you advice about how to cultivate love and compassion, then your ego gives you advice about how to get more stuff, and like promote yourself. And so you have this contest then. You have two advices. You have the advice of the saintly teacher, you have the advice of your ego. And he said, or oftentimes what happens is, and this is what this point is getting at, is when you're in front of that teacher and they're giving you advice, or when you're reading a book, like advice from a spiritual friend, or a book like this, you say, yes, that's so smart, it's so true. Love is like what matters. So you accept, right? You promise to observe, right? That whether it's you're reading a book and you get inspired, or like you're in front of someone like Lam-Rim or Khyentse Rinpoche or the Dalai Lama, and like what just happened, you see, right, 10,000 people take the Bodhisattva vow, right? Yes, I'll practice universal altruism and so on. But then what happens is there's a contest. This is how Lam-Rim sometimes was joking, but he said where then your ego is saying, okay, here's what you should do. And then that commitment is saying, no, here's what you should do. And then you have a choice to make. Right? So one thing that often happens is you go against the advice of training your mind, and instead you follow the advice of your ego. So this is saying be careful of that. Right? Whereas because we're all good at rationalizing. Another way of saying this is we're good at rationalizing, right? Saying that's true in general, but right now it's really important that I.